Now for more on the president's legal challenges, why they've gone so badly, I'm joined by Jed Shugerman, law professor at Fordham School of Law. Jed, I've lost count of these lawsuits, but it's always hard, right? With Trump hijinks of like they're equal parts clownish and kind of terrifying, which is how I would describe it. Like, how would you characterize this body of lawsuits they've pursued?
Well, the body I would describe in the technical term of meritless. So they can't even come up with a solid anecdote of either fraud or votes not being counted. And they really, based upon the numbers that you showed at the top of the show, they would have to be showing a massive criminal conspiracy of tens, frankly, of hundreds of thousands of votes to raise the questions on these three different paths to 270. So one example is that once in Pennsylvania and in Michigan in the last couple of days, lawyers have presented witnesses that simply ask questions about whether their votes were counted. Judges then turned to those lawyers and said, "Are you alleging fraud?" And here's the great thing about having these court cases. Those lawyers know that they'll be sanctioned for misrepresentations or lies. Both of those lawyers retreated and said no. One lawyer said, "To my knowledge at present, no."
Right.
When asked directly, they are denying that they're alleging fraud.
Right. And I mean, you even got people who are coming to testify saying that they think their vote wasn't counted, and then being asked like, "Well, are you sure your vote wasn't counted?" And being like, "No, I don't know." That doesn't work.
That totally doesn't work. You aren't going to be able to raise any questions about the states at this margin at the 10. Keep in mind the margins in Arizona and in Georgia, as you said, they're over 10,000 votes. Having a couple of cases where people don't know if their votes were counted has frankly been laughed. Literally, judges are laughing. And one judge said, "Come on now," in response to some of the Trump's lawyers' claims. These have been. Go ahead.
Oh, well, we should just note that there was sort of a funny moment today when the Trump campaign filed a wide-ranging lawsuit challenging the counting of votes in Wayne County, Detroit, of course, not just in a federal district court in Michigan, but in the U.S. Court of Federal Claims in D.C., which has no jurisdiction in such cases. They just filed in the wrong court.
Yes, we call this the Four Seasons total lawyering. Right. I mean, this ploy is effective. If you don't have any substance to your vote fraud claim, then at least you can have just like in the Four Seasons total landscaping, people will be asking you, "Why are you here?" That's the same. They filed in a court that has absolutely no jurisdiction over these claims. At a certain point, my argument is actually that we should be welcoming these claims precisely because it exposes how little is behind these vote fraud claims. It may be a fiction, but about whether there was fraud, but the skepticism and that's the larger problem. Those are social facts. And so the advantage of the Trump campaign actually litigating it is it exposes how little they have. It debunks the longer-term Republican propaganda about there being rampant voter fraud, which is why they make claims and why the Roberts Court has ruled in the favor of things like voter ID or what they call, vote caging, where they take people off of the rolls. I think this actually plays into a longer-term advantage by being able to raise questions about how illegitimate these claims are. But the last point I'd make is I think Democrats want to be careful about, sort of denouncing litigation over voter fraud, because not just in 2 years or in 4 years, but in 2 months, we're looking at a Georgia runoff where I think there are legitimate concerns about voter suppression. Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue wrote a remarkable letter asking for the Georgia Secretary of State to resign. And I think that wasn't just working for reps. I think that was inviting voter suppression. Mm-hmm. I think Democrats want to make sure that when they have this, when the shoe's on the other foot and the tables are turned, they know that it's legitimate the game.
I read your piece making this argument, Jed, and I really appreciate the kind of like bring it on and trust that the courts. I mean, I tend to be a real, somewhat cynical and somewhat of a legal realist, but I think that in this case, we are seeing that like the law does count for something, and you can't just waltz in with total nonsense and expect to get anywhere. And I think that's been a very reassuring aspect of this over the last week, which has not been very reassuring overall. Jed Shugerman, thanks for your time tonight.